Everybody, my name is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of Career Club's Cool Companies You Should Know. Cool Companies You Should Know is one of my favorite podcast episodes because we're introducing folks to companies that you may not have heard of, but are doing cool things in the marketplace. And we're always pleased to have a couple of executives from the company join and share a little bit more about their value proposition, leadership style, culture, and then importantly, the kind of talent that they're looking for. But before we get started with all of that, if you're not familiar with Career Club, we are using proven sales tools and methods to help people like you find a career that matters. If you haven't checked us out before, career.club is our website, and there you'll find lots of content, previous podcast recordings, and the ability to contact us. So with that, I'd love to introduce our guest today from HIVERY. We've got Heather Martin, who is a VP of Sales. Hello, Heather.
Hello.
And John Showalter is VP of Client Services. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Bob.
Awesome. It's great to have you guys here. So ladies first, just to help us get to know you a little bit, Heather, would love to hear just briefly about your background, where you are, and how you found yourself at HIVERY.
Yeah, thanks. So Heather Martin, I'm based in the Denver, Colorado area. Moved out here about 3 years ago. Love the weather out here. It was a great place to be during the pandemic. I came to HIVERY from Numerator, joined Numerator as part of the InfoScout acquisition. Obviously, Bob knew you from that time, so pleasure to be reconnecting. And prior to that, I was actually in back-end IT and big data analytics. I like to say, like, I used to sell the database that people put a bunch of data into, and then people would go, great, now what do I do? And it would take 6 to 10 months to get there. Moved to InfoScout because it was closer to the real problem, selling the data itself. Then I'm at HIVERY now. It's a great connection between those two, helping big data analytics take advantage of the data our customers have.
Awesome. That's great. And yes, I am jealous of Denver. John, just a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a little jealous of Denver as well. I just moved from Los Angeles to Nashville. We're loving Nashville so far, but not loving the weather this time of year. But yeah, I've been in CPG, all my career, about 30-ish years. I'm going to leave it at 30-ish. Coming out of university with Kellogg's, Bayer Consumer Care, Coca-Cola, and then most recently at Red Bull. And I guess the common thread through my career was always in the category management, kind of get to grow up with category management in this industry, luckily. And so in kind of insight strategy, category management roles through all of those. I joined HIVERY about 9 months ago. So it was my first time to kind of change seats, if you will, and come over to the solutions side. But how I became, I guess, aware of HIVERY was actually in that role at Red Bull. I was particularly, this is about 2018, maybe early 2019, when they were just barely getting started here in the U.S. with their proposition. I heard about that, and through some context, obviously in the industry, reached out, got some meetings, and it resulted into a project for us in those very early days. So my initial exposure was actually being a client or a user from that perspective.
Yeah, well, that's quite a credentializer that you believed in it so much that you decided to join the team. So for those who are listening and watching, if they're not familiar with HIVERY, kind of at a high level, what's the value proposition? What's the problem that HIVERY saw in the marketplace and sought to solve?
Yeah, I'll start a little bit, Bob, with our origin story. So HIVERY came out of the Coca-Cola Founders Program, which was a bit of a startup incubator. And they were originally tasked, 2 serial entrepreneurs were tasked with a business problem. That business problem was around vending machines. We have this huge fleet of vending machines, and we want to increase sales and decrease labor because you've got people and trucks servicing every vending machine. And they partnered with Australia's leading data science organization, CSIRO, the Data 61 Labs, and found out that if they applied machine learning algorithms to the point of sale data from those vending machines, they could predict how each item would perform in each vending machine, predict how many of each item should be there, what the assortment should be, decreasing out of stocks, decreasing restock visits, and increasing sales. That was about 7 years ago. And a couple of years later, faced with a downward trending category in carbonated soft drinks, because we were all moving away from sugary soft drinks, a category manager at the Coca-Cola company was trying to figure out, how do I continue to grow one of my biggest retailers' sales in this environment? He looked across Coca-Cola's technologies and said, well, what is a store shelf if it's not just a really big vending machine? And can't I take that same technology, apply it to the store shelf, and grow sales? We have 3 years of in-market results for them. We've grown the categories business $150 million every year. The CPG's business about 50. So significant growth opportunity. And then I joined the company about 2 years ago to help bring it to market across additional categories, retailers, and we've grown pretty fast since then.
Wow. Yeah, as you were describing the vending machine, kind of the penny started going off in my head. I'm like, yeah, that can see where it's basically a shelf. It's a small shelf, but it's a shelf. And then how you go take that? And then all the same problems, just at more scale that a retailer would be dealing with. And then, John, I guess as a user, at Red Bull, how did you see the value proposition? And was it replacing something that you were doing, or was it incremental to what you guys were already doing? How did it fit into sort of your tech stack, if you will?
Yes, I think I touched on this in my introduction. It was first and foremost, I was at a point where we had grown exponentially. We started a category team, back in 2009, 2010, had grown in resources and in headcount exponentially over that period, but kind of starting to hit the wall where do I continue to just add headcount, or can I find other paths to success? So I was at the same time at a crossroads of asking myself for a department of category managers and analysts, where does all the buzz at the time, still today, but particularly then around advanced analytics, data science, AI, et cetera. So I was asking myself kind of not only what other solutions are out there that can differentiate us, make us smarter, make us better, but what does a category manager of the future look like? Are they data scientists really, or some hybrid in between? And during that journey, first, I guess I'd say, I think it's very fair to say that the CPG industry as a whole has a track record of extension, kind of copying in a way. And, I'm not trying to cast judgment. It's been very successful, particularly from the actual consumer product point of view, right? We wouldn't have nearly all the choices that are fulfilling all of these need states that we know consumers have. And we wouldn't have all these, some very successful products if it weren't for that kind of an environment. But on the solution side, I guess to play that back, I would say, obviously data's gotten bigger, technology has improved, and we changed a little bit the way that we do business. But by and large, we're still doing planograms and still doing the planning process very similar today as we were 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I felt that HIVERY truly was one of those few that I could hold up with one hand, maybe two, in this industry over 25, 30 years and say, they are genuinely doing something disruptive, creative, and innovative. And I proved it out, like I say, in the initial project with them a few years back. Maybe lesser important, but one of the reasons why too, I think they're so groundbreaking, if you will, in their approach to this problem that a lot of other people have tried to solve over the years is, they didn't come from CPG like all of us. They didn't have that perspective or didn't have that kind of, those constructs to operate within. They came at it much more from, I'd say, an academic and even a scientific perspective to solve the problem. So again, when offered the opportunity, when that manifests itself a few years later, it was just a natural to join this crazy group of folks.
Yeah. So just going back to the Coca-Cola part of it, and because that's quite an endorsement to get in their incubator. Is it fair to say then that the folks that started HIVERY came with deep CPG experience? A little bit of a leading question.
I would say not necessarily. I would say that they were accepted into an incubator supported and funded by the Coca-Cola system, but not career CPG guys. So we're able to come in and look at a problem from a completely different lens, a completely different viewpoint, and bring fresh ideas.
Yeah. And maybe I could add, Bob, that, I go back to your question about the unique value proposition. I think we've told a bunch of stories, but if I really boiled it down, we do 4 things. We start by the ability to leverage large data sets and analyze it from the bottoms up, store item level up, right? Then we allow you to simulate and conduct strategy simulations, test hypotheses, predict how that's going to impact the store or the retailer through key KPIs like revenue and unit movement and things like that. And then we show you a clear path to execution. So we have the ability to say, hey, if I rationalize these 3 SKUs, what's that going to do to the business? And then, well, along with rationalizing those 3 SKUs, I want to make sure we don't switch too many products in and out. So I want to limit my churn to 5%, for example. So you're making sure that all of those rules, all the retailer and supply chain requirements are done at that store level. It's executable. And we even generate a planogram that comes out the other side to say, here's how you go do that. And then we really create a significant amount of transparency between the supplier and the retailer, because all of the rules you put into place are able to be audited and checked to see what's really impacting the results. So we don't want to create a black box. And so at the most basic, to boil it down, I think that's really what our unique value proposition is.
And then, so that's really interesting, because what you're making me think of, when you talk like SKU optimization, doing things at a store level, we find ourselves in a high inflation environment. We find ourselves in supply chain / logistics issues. How are clients using the tool to help them navigate those things when either they can't get enough of some product, or it's challenging to get it from point A to point B, or other use cases that you might have around that?
Yeah, I'm working with some of our clients today to look at, okay, if I have 15 items on the shelf today, but I'm only going to be able to produce or supply 10, right? What are the right 10? And if I look at that from the tops down, it might be a different number than if I'm looking at cannibalization and demand transfer from the bottom up to see what that looks like. And whatever level you're executing at, you don't have to execute it at the store level, but the bottoms up analysis is going to be more accurate. So,
yeah. John, anything?
Yes, that is an excellent question. And Heather described it very well. Most of our clients today are, and have been for the past couple of years, having to deal with unprecedented disruptions to the business, right? COVID started it, supply chain issues, out of stocks, et cetera. So being able to much more quickly, and quite frankly, I would say accurately, predict what the outcome would be of varying different scenarios, and then be able to action against that is just really critical.
Well, and I would think, kind of empathizing with the sales part of the equation, Heather, I mean, the ROI should be pretty demonstrable.
Yeah, on average, we see a 5% growth opportunity. Full case revenue, no trade promotion spend, no new items.
Oh, wow. So if I heard you guys right, the company started about 7 years ago, and kind of moved into more full store things a couple 3 years after that. Where's sort of the company and its growth trajectory now?
Yeah, so we're really excited. I joined the company just a little bit after post Series A, and we are really excited that we just closed our Series B round.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. A $30 million round led by Tiger, and then with full support from our existing investors as well, reinvesting in the company. So super excited to share that. Obviously, that means a lot for our growth trajectory, and a lot of changes to come, but it's a really exciting time to be here.
Yeah, wow. Well, so very much part of the premise of Cool Companies is there are companies getting funding that are growing and may not always be companies I've heard of before because of where they are just sort of in their own kind of maturation. But I'll say, even since the last episode that we did of Cool Companies, there's been a marked sea change in venture capital. And Tiger being maybe one of the very largest, I think they've got the most investments out there. That to get money, significant money in this environment, it's not any longer just selling a crazy growth story, but it's like, no, we actually have a real business here, and the proverbial quote path to profitability. There's a real commercial model here, to invest in. Not we're on the road to getting 50 million users. So I mean, it's a huge compliment to you guys. So we'll kind of double click on that in a few more minutes as we look at how that's impacting some of your people needs. But so again, congratulations. That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear you guys, because this is always really interesting to listeners, is the culture, the leadership style of the company. It's one thing to read about it in some generic job description or what the company talks about on their website. And the feedback that we get on Cool Companies is, hey, I get to see real people. And like, hey, I like him, I like her, I think I trust him, I really believed what they were telling me. And so we'd love for you guys to be able to start sharing with the audience, again, a little bit around leadership, a little bit around culture. Like, what's it like to work at HIVERY?
I'll start, Heather. it's fantastic in all facets. But I guess I'd share a story previous to that too. For anyone out there that's had any kind of a experience or interaction with my previous employer with Red Bull, I think they would agree with me when I say Red Bull also has an amazing culture that I was just fortunate enough to be a part of for 12 years. So I would say the reason they do is because they want to. And when you want to, from the executive level all the way through, you have plans in place to get you there, and you hold people accountable. You hold leadership, people accountable. You have measures and metrics that help you understand how to navigate that and how to be successful. So I guess first I'd just like to say, I feel like I had 12 years experience of seeing it done right and not seeing it done where it unfortunately can be a lot of organizations where it's just the, on the website and, and maybe in some conference rooms and hallways and things of that nature. Interestingly enough too, I remember my interview process. Obviously they wanted to find out if I'd really done anything in category management and if I'd maybe managed a person or two and done some analytics, but most of the interview process was actually around this topic and what, for them to feel comfortable of what my experience, what my positioning or what my vision was, or how I would approach it, and what basically I could bring to the company in this space. So it was apparent to me, and one of the primary reasons I joined is that leadership here, just like at Red Bull, is very, very much committed to it, serious about it, and we're absolutely completing the play in terms of the execution of that.
Yep, that's cool. Heather?
Yeah, so I would say, so when I joined the company 2 years ago, there were, I might get this number wrong, but maybe 4 people in the US. And now we're up to like 22, right? So kind of, I think John's absolutely right in that you have to hire for culture, you have to hire for values. But if I were to, our values are on our website. I'm not going to walk through all 5 of them, but if I were to pick one, and I could pick a bunch of them, I'm sure they'll come up as we're talking about hiring, but the one that always kind of strikes me is this concept of the H factor, right? Which is an extremely vague value, and usually vague values don't actually get executed in reality, right? But I think that what it means to me is that it encompasses all of our other values, like living passionately, knowing why you're here, knowing what you want to do, and bringing your true self to work. And I think that's really important. So I'll give you an example. So we started a tradition years ago of assigning call signs to new hires. So as the team gets to know you, you get a nickname. And that nickname is supposed to be a little bit poking fun, a little bit okay, has to be customer facing. And you probably can't really see it, but my background, I've got a whole bunch of video games, becomes a really big topic of conversation in meetings, especially during the pandemic. So like my call sign is Yahtzee, which is funny because I do not play Yahtzee because that's not a strategic enough game. So it's a little bit poking fun, but that's just an example of how we like get to know each other, have fun with each other, and do a good, really, really enjoy that. But if I were to highlight other values, other real things, I don't know, Bob, have you read The Hard Thing About Hard Things, the book?
No.
Well, there's a section in the book about culture and about how you have to really focus on culture, but it's all about like, what's the one thing that the team thinks about that really defines your culture, right? And I was reading this book on the way to an offsite. I started polling the team, like, what is it? And everyone came back and said the same thing in one way, shape, or form. And it's, we all hold hands, put on our pirate hats to solve a problem, and face in the same direction and go solve it, right? Like, from the C-suite all the way down, everyone gets involved, everyone rolls up their sleeves, wants to solve whatever problem that is. So you're never on an island, you're never doing something alone. You raise your hand, you say, hey, I've got this situation, or I've got this problem, or there's something I want to go solve, and everyone rallies together regardless of what your position is. I think it really defines our servant leadership and really how we go about building a culture here within the US. And across the globe, obviously, as well. But I live the U.S. piece every single day. So,
John, what value would you pick?
First, I would say, Bob, if I could, and Heather, it's over. Oh, wrong shoulder. It's hard to see. I have a my call sign's Hollywood, and it's the only Hollywood artifact in my house that I could find. So there's the H factor. Sorry, I'm so sorry. What was the question?
No, just thinking about values and which value of HIVERY really kind of resonates with you.
I have a couple. And it's funny, 6 months ago or so, when we were having our, what we'd call our second half planning meeting back in January, kicking off the, next back half of the year and what we're going to do. I was giving my update, hey, this is what here's what's happened in the last 6 months. Here's where we're headed for the next 6 months. And my very first slide, I started with thinking about what I'd experienced in my first 6 months in HIVERY. And it actually was putting up one of our values, which is think entrepreneurially. And yeah, I finally got it out of my mouth right. And what I had witnessed in this organization. So what that meant to me was, at that point in time, when I hear entrepreneur, that word entrepreneur, I mean, you typically go straight to, oh, you think of our founders, these really creative, innovative people that saw an opportunity, and basically assembled a team and built a company around it. And that's obviously very true. But when you talk to actually a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly those in small business, oftentimes what they'll say is particularly in those early days, being an entrepreneur means wearing every hat of the organization at any given time. And we had a situation where during that first 6 month period of mine, where we just needed hands, we needed eyes to help out to QA a particular project before it went to the client, right? So we got to make sure everything that we've done to this thing is really what we think we did in the engine, but we need people to prove it, sorry. And people with chief in their title and all the way up through the organization, through every facet of the organization, people in sales and Heather's team, obviously still kept doing their day jobs, but spent some nights and weekends to actually come together. So, that's an example of where I really saw, from top to bottom, A to Z, entrepreneurship in action. So this place really lives its values for sure.
Yeah, and that's such a great call out, John, because you're right. I think a lot of times people do think of entrepreneur as, I had the big idea, or that's the person who's out, trying to get venture capital funding or whatever. That's what the entrepreneur working on their exit strategy. Mm-hmm. It's like, act like this is your business and that you have a very vested interest in it, and that you actually care. It's your baby too. And those are hard. Heather, I think you said it earlier, like recruiting for culture, because culture isn't always top down. Like, you're importing culture, right? And that becomes part of the fabric of the company. And we hire John or Susan, whoever comes in, and they become part of the culture. Their H factor, them bringing all of themselves to work, becomes part of the recipe of the soup that is HIVERY in your all's case.
And I think you're right, Bob. And I think the one other thing that really maybe speaks to the culture more so than defines it is how many people within the organization have worked with other people in the organization before, either brought their friends over or brought coworkers over. There's a handful of folks that came out of the Info Scout days. 2 of my old team members are on our team now. There are folks in our product team and our VP of retail who both came from the same organization, brought in some other folks. So you build this, and folks from the Coke ecosystem, right? People who used to work for some of the folks that were early days in the company. So I think that really speaks to it, right? That these are people who worked together before and want to work together again. And now we're creating a new culture, right? It's not, to your point about importing and creating and creating a melting pot, but you're bringing the right people to the show. And you're absolutely right. It's something that we interview strongly for because it's so important to us.
Yeah. Well, from think about like people that get promoted, people that, look like the rising stars at HIVERY. And maybe we just covered a little bit of it, but thinking about the folks that do really well at HIVERY, what are they doing that is capturing people's attention?
I'll take this first. It is that we're looking for, and that they are therefore acting like what we might describe as mavericks or something. Another one of our values: be a pirate. And I'll touch.
What does that mean for people that aren't familiar? What does that mean? Be a pirate?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, big shout out to Sam Conniff, my buddy from the UK, who wrote a book on this. So I highly recommend just be more pirate. Google it and become a part of Sam's movement to be more pirate. It means, well, first off, it means to definitely challenge the status quo and be comfortable with being kind of an explorer in undefined or uncharted waters. Secondly, or part of that is to not necessarily follow the ordinary rules and take risk, intelligent risk, but still, be able to work in kind of an uncomfortable, undefined, setting, and really be a discoverer, be an explorer, and quite frankly, be okay with challenging all the norms and break things.
Yes.
I would add on, I was just gonna say, I would add on, like, see a problem, solve a problem, right?
Yep.
Is kind of what that means. And I think there's so many examples of people doing that and saying that, like, it might not be directly in my role, but somebody has a problem. And what we do, again, is servant leadership. We hold hands, we solve the problem. And my unique skill set makes me able to help in this circumstance. And so go take that risk and solve it.
John, this one might be for you in that, a lot of what we're talking about is like what it feels to be like inside the four walls of HIVERY, the remote virtual intercontinental four walls of HIVERY, because you guys are based in Australia. But looking at from the client side, what's their experience with your culture? How does a client see HIVERY?
Hopefully extremely collaborative, amazingly available, and ever increasing consultative.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to build on one or more of those points? Yeah,
absolutely. If I could probably say this in terms of, the talent we're looking for, what we're really focused on for the folks that we want to join, at least client services for sure, is, first of all, keep in mind our mantra is data has a better idea. So
say that again. Say it slow.
Data has a better idea.
Okay.
Yep. Therefore, pretty foundationally, looking for folks that have a really strong track record of analytics, dealing with large data sets, but more importantly, turning those data sets into insights and into things that can be actioned on. Next, to also though be strong and you say category management, or I'd say in just good business strategy and planning, being able to identify the issues, the priorities, and to develop solutions that you can then, in a compelling fashion, bring to your client. And then lastly, that I mentioned earlier, is being consultative. And to me, being consultative means first and foremost applying what I would call empathy, but empathy in a business setting. And what I mean by that is when you're empathetic, you genuinely, and I underscore genuinely, are trying to understand what it's like to be in your client's shoes. What's really their objectives and strategies, of course, but more importantly, what are they struggling with? What approaches have they tried in the past that maybe have not worked and gotten them to bright? And after thoroughly really understanding all of those things that are driving their business, or not driving their business, I should say, only then can I think a good consultant offer up those solutions and even in that, challenge them. I'd be more pirate, right? So challenge the status quo in terms of, well, maybe we need to be doing this a little bit differently. Maybe we need a different way of thinking or a different approach.
Yeah. Heather, thinking about, John kind of segued us into maybe the third part of our conversation here, which is, around the kind of talent. You talked about the Series B, and again, congratulations. That's just phenomenal. Is you guys will continue to scale. And the way that I usually describe it, so don't let me put words in your all's mouths, but, we're scaling out, which means we need more of everything, finance, HR, everything, right? Not just Python coders or whatever. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of cases, we're also scaling up. So like we need, and John, it sort of gets to your empathy, consultative kind of thing, to be able to raise the talent bar, continually be raising the talent bar. So from the sales side of the equation, Heather, how do you personally see kind of the talent that you're going to be looking for to get you guys to the next place?
Yeah, great question, Bob. So we hire for culture, right? So I'm looking for people who are collaborative, want to partner. We're a remote first organization. So it has to be a proactive collaboration, right? Yes. We have opportunities to get together, but generally people who like to collaborate, who want to share what they're learning in the marketplace, as much as possible. I think when I think about skill sets, we're hiring for enterprise sales directors. So these are people who have had team lead roles in the past, have had account director roles, enterprise sales roles, who have a really strong sales process. We don't have to manage the team, which most sales directors love. But we support, we bring you on, we give you a full 3 weeks of a boot camp to get you up to speed. We support you. Whether it's me or Scott Anderson, our chief revenue officer, or Greg Jensen, who's one of our team leads, coming on your calls with you, right? Everybody's available to support, but we're looking for people who have that strong sales process, who need to get up to speed on HIVERY, and can go out and start trying to solve their customers' problems, right? With people who are successful are able to say, this is what HIVERY does on paper. This is what the problem is my client's needing to solve. And here's how we work together on that, right? And I think that ability to connect those dots is extremely important in what we do, because transparently, we're finding out every day of new ways that our technology can be used, right? So we started out in vending, moved over to category management. We're doing projects on sales and marketing use cases, and being able to identify, well, what's really that situation, being consultative from the sales perspective, and then partnering with our client services team to really support.
Well, you just completely anticipated my next question. How do you guys work together? How do your teams work together?
Well, first off, if our services, if our product and our services aren't successful, once Heather's team lands a client, then relationship ends pretty quickly. So it's paramount that we're in lockstep from the very beginnings of an engagement with a client to understand and anticipate their needs and start scoping that out really, really early in the process, and understanding what are the needs going to be of that client as we move through. And we really, and I sound kind of hokey, but we don't divorce ourselves of each other throughout that engagement, staying very connected along the process with the client, making sure that we're on point, getting feedback from all parties involved. Because typically too, when early stage here, a project can morph pretty quickly. As everyone gets more experience in what we're accomplishing, then obviously a lot more ideas get thrown on the whiteboard. So it requires a significant amount of coordination early on, scoping out, understanding client needs, and getting those on the board. But it really never diminishes throughout the entire process to keep this thing going. And I don't know if you were going to ask this one, Bob, but I will tell you how we're expanding in client services is when I started only 9 months ago, it felt like and I think really actively, we only had what I would call a handful of clients active at that point in time. And 9 months later, that client roster is expanded quite significantly. So obviously, we need more client services people to just support the organic growth in clients for sure. But what's also happening is we're also growing, I guess, the depth and the breadth with each client, who are doing more and more type projects, which is creating opportunities for us to actually being able to put more resources on a dedicated client. So allowing us to have maybe a lead analytic consultant, but analyst support on that team. But yeah, the opportunities here, if you go to our website and just in client services alone, you're going to see titles or postings for things that might include category manager in the title, but also category analyst in the title. And we really are looking for talent that is almost across the entire spectrum of experience in this space that I described earlier for the skill sets that we're looking for.
And Heather, if you had to describe it from your side, what's interfacing with client services and sort of the client services and sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So a question I get a lot in the interview process is, so I land a customer, then what? Mm-hmm. Right? Am I supposed to service it? Do you take it away from me and somebody else takes care of it? And I think John did a great job of describing that we absolutely stay married. So from the sales side, once we're in a named account territory, so that account is always your account. You continue to own the relationship. You've got an AC, an analytical consultant on John's team, who's also assigned to that account to support, and sometimes a team. And those teams work together weekly to connect, to make sure we're all on the same page, that the analytical consultant knows the conversations the sales director is having with either the budget holder or the contract holder, other parts of the organization, right? So they know what's coming down the pipeline. And we really try to become part of our clients' team. So we're supporting them. We're understanding their business. We're identifying opportunities where we can help or expand. And, it's a SaaS product. So it's not a one-time come in, solve the problem and walk away. It's really that relationship's going to organically grow, morph, change over time within the context of what HIVERY can do, which is a lot of different things. So absolutely stay married and a really close relationship with John's team for sure.
No, that's great. And they really are different skill sets, and trying to put all that on one person usually doesn't work out very well. So I like the model that you guys have. Very quickly, you mentioned, Heather, about a question you get asked a lot in interviews. Just sort of a high level overview of the interview process at HIVERY.
Yeah, so I'll give it from the sales perspective, and John, maybe where it's different or the same on the client services side. So it's typically 2 first conversations with 2 members of the sales team, leadership team. So that's just like, are you a hunter? Do you want to go out and find new clients? Do you get it? Is that what makes you get up in the morning, right? And do you have the sales process skills we've talked about? From there, we move into a challenge. So in our case, it's a role play challenge where you're, interfacing with a client across a panel to see how you, as close as we can, how you actually do things in real life. And then there's a cultural interview with a panel at the end. So it's really a 4-step process. We move through that fairly quickly, as long as the candidate we're talking to wants to move through quickly.
Is that 2 weeks, 4 weeks? About how long would it take?
Well, so I would say the first 2 conversations happen in a week. Then it's up to the candidate on how long they want to prep for that challenge. And then right after that challenge, within a couple of days, we usually have the cultural interview set up.
Cool. Awesome. And John, your interview process?
Pretty much the same process. Obviously me in that initial couple of people on my team, so they can not only assess, people on my team can obviously assess the work that the candidate is doing, but more importantly, they can hear from folks that are doing the work, what it's like to work here, what kind of work are they doing day in and day out, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Only thing I'd like to call out, I guess, is when I first heard the word, we do a cultural interview, I kind of shrieked a little bit. And I thought, oh no, this is one of those, we got to make sure this person can fit our culture. And thank goodness it's just the opposite. It's an opportunity for them to meet senior people in the organization, a cross section of people in the organization. It's that final step, and not talking about, that kind of arduous or that real tense kind of traditional interview, can you do this job thing? But hey, would you be comfortable here? This is what we're about. And would you be comfortable here? Does this feel like it's right for you? And quite frankly, the strongest interview question out there is probably, what do you think you can bring to the culture? What do you think you can add to, and how would you approach it? And what makes you unique, but something that you think that would really help us and build this fantastic culture. So,
all right, John, live television. Do you remember your answer to that question?
Ooh, I honestly don't. Let me think a minute. What was my answer to the question? Sorry, you're gonna have to edit this one out. I don't know.
Heather?
I don't. I remember what my question was to what spirit animal I would be.
Okay, well, so let's go through that. Hollywood.
I think I gave. Yeah, exactly. I actually gave a monkey, a chimpanzee, because I think one of the best characteristics a client services analytic consultant category manager can have is to have, and I'm going to steal this from someone back at my previous employer that I love dearly. I won't mention her name because I haven't asked for permission. To be curious like a toddler, constantly at why, almost to the point of annoyance. Please don't be annoying to our clients, but still, to really genuinely to be curious, constantly asking questions, asking more questions than offering advice.
Oh, I like that.
I'm going to answer the same question, Bob, because I didn't get the what can you bring to the culture question. I got my cultural interview was challenging, which I'd love to tell anybody about. It was great, but it was all about, hey, we're pretty early here, and we need help, but we need to make sure we're doing the right kind of things. That's what mine was about, which I think is super important. I didn't mention we're hiring for product roles in the U.S. As we massively expand our team, both in Australia as well as here, getting our product team a little closer to our customers, but making sure that we've got sales folks who are, and this is the question to me, who are selling the right things, both for our client's sake as well as our team's sake, right?
Yes.
But the animal question, I think I actually recorded an answer to this question on our website, because one of our co-founders, Frankie, is really big on helping people build their personal brand within the organization. So, podcasts, webinars, and videos about what animal HIVERY would be if we were here. But I think mine was an elephant, playing off of the number of neurons, and AI has unlimited neurons, unlimited computational capacity, and elephants have a lot more neurons than you would think. And then that they all love to spend time together, right? Wow. I think for me that was so important, is making sure I had an opportunity to meet enough people in the organization, and that I felt like it was a place that I could be myself, that you could speak plainly, and that you can speak plainly with respect, right? Because if everything isn't out on the table, then there are things that people need to make decisions on and they just simply don't know. So being able to speak plainly with respect and respect everyone and see people from another point of view. And if I had that question, I think that's my answer, right? I have a really, I think it's a unique ability to be able to put myself in somebody else's shoes. And John, I think, was teasing me the other day because there was something on Slack and I came in and I was like, well, I can see both sides of this situation. Let me write a diatribe about what this is. And at the end, I was like, TLDR, I don't have an opinion. Like, I can see both sides and I could easily argue either side of this. So that's probably my answer.
No, I think that's great. John, I have to go back to curiosity for half of a second.
Okay.
Dorothy Parker has a quote. I used to work at a place called Curiosity, so they had tons of curiosity quotes. And the one that stuck with me was where she said, the cure for boredom is curiosity. There is no cure for curiosity. And I think that's being, just constantly curious. And then on the pirate thing, I thought you'd be a parrot, right? I mean, but that's the pirate animal. So there you go. Is there anything that we have not, at an important level, not talked about HIVERY that you feel remiss if we didn't cover, or have we touched on most everything, you think?
Ooh, Heather, you got anything?
I don't think so. I think
we're good.
Most of the topics. You did a good job moderating.
I was going to say your moderator must be amazing or something. I don't know. No, well, I love your all story. Heather, you alluded to this earlier. Like, I do know a lot of the folks at HIVERY and have tons and tons of respect. And John, as we've gotten to know each other, it's very easy for me to see how you've kind of fit into that fabric very organically. But despite warm feelings, there's also sort of the cold reality of the marketplace, and you guys are winning in the marketplace. And obviously, again, congratulations on the recent Series B. That's huge validation, again, particularly in the current market that we find ourselves in, where more startups are talking about layoffs, not the series. So huge kudos to you guys. I really appreciate the time. It's been fun. I've learned a lot more about the culture at HIVERY, which has been great. And I have to go read your pirate book and get more conversant in that. But wishing you guys much success. If people want to learn any more about positions that are open at HIVERY, particularly with the funding, what's the best way for them to do that?
The website's probably a good place to start, but reach out to John or I directly on LinkedIn. There will be more jobs being posted over time. We're working through those final details. So definitely check out the website, but don't hesitate to reach out if you think it'd be a good cultural fit. And we'll see what we can do with that. Awesome.
Well, again, thank you. Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, I'm just going to say same thing. Start with the website or LinkedIn, and feel free to shoot us messages. If you just want to have a conversation, if you're not even sure, if you want to have a conversation, then please reach out.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. I'm really glad to be able to showcase HIVERY. You guys are doing cool things. You're making a difference and doing it with a smile. And so that's nice. So wish you guys the best. Have a great rest of your summer. And thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.